Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lido History. As you can see, there is no camera, and we are back with New World, which means I have a guest. This week my guest is Pixel, a specialist in Mesoamerican history. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. You've maybe seen me around in OSP and a little bit in the religious studies server. I have been studying Mesoamerica sort of as an amateur for 3-4 years, and in the more recently, we together with a couple other people, I made a political map of Mesoamerica in 1426, which is the only map of its kind.
Oof.
And it is the it also has many flaws, which is why I am slowly working on with a couple other people on making a refined version that's a bit more accurate, but it's broadly correct. And Mesoamerica, pre-Columbian Mesoamerica specifically, is my passion. I've spent thousands of dollars researching it, so I'm very happy to talk about it.
That's good, and we will have plenty to talk about. So, before we get into it though, I've got a couple of announcements. The first and most important one is that as of today, Twitch has changed its structure involving emotes, which means if you are a follower of the channel, you now have access to emotes. They rolled out that beta feature literally earlier today, which means that you have access to the big three of the channel, so everyone can now say hello. If you are just joining in and are not watching, or have not followed before, all emotes are derived from actual marginalia. 100% genuine, not always from the Middle Ages. We've got one from the 19th century, but otherwise, everything is from the Middle Ages. Everything is from an actual manuscript, is made by a real person, by hand. And so, congratulations to all followers for having access. If you want access to even more emotes, make sure you subscribe. And if you subscribe, make sure you let me know. I see we got one more subscriber while I wasn't paying attention, so whoever that was, thank you. And do let me know so we can thank you more properly. Awesome. Before we get stuck into the game, do you want to give a kind of brief primer, like the 30-second version of kind of the big overview of Mesoamerican history leading up to the Spanish arrival? I know, easy task.
Okay, about 30 seconds for. Well, the period immediately before.
Yeah, let's just do like the 15th century here.
The period immediately before Spanish contact is called the late post-classic, and it is distinguished by as being a period of state formation and rapid intensification of agriculture, urbanization, and the people are trading more stuff over longer distances more frequently. It's a time of rapid population growth, and of course, the politically, it's also a time when the big Aztec Empire or Triple Alliance has come to be a hegemon of the region. But it's not the only big power. There's a couple others, and a lot of people don't know about anybody other than the Aztecs and maybe the Maya. But the post-classic is full of dozens of interesting people. So
Awesome. You say trade increased to longer distances. How long is long in this time period?
Well, in the classic period, which is before the post-classic, and it stretches from like 380 at the latest to 900 to 1,000. Trade was mostly the longest distance trade route reached to the American Southwest for turquoise, and down to Ecuador for metals. And metallurgy was actually introduced to Mesoamerica from South America.
Okay.
But in the post-classic, or sorry, in the intervening period, the long distance trade like stopped for various complicated reasons, and then in the late post-classic, it's picking up again. There's starting to be more frequent contact again with the American Southwest and South America as well, and also to a degree, probably with the Caribbean, but it's a bit. It's not really conclusive at the moment if the Caribbean and Mesoamerica had contact, but there's just bits and pieces here and there that show it's fairly likely.
Okay.
I guess it's sort of comparable to the Polynesian situation, but a bit less on the front lines, I guess.
Okay. When you say uncertain, what's like making people uncertain about that? Is it like a lack of good seafaring technology, or is there something else that's making people think that no, maybe there's not contact between the coast of modern Mexico and the Caribbean islands, which are not that far away?
Well, part of it comes down to I guess a little bit about the seafaring technology. It's for every pre-Columbian American society had the canoe, and canoes are a bit. The word canoe, most people when they hear canoe, they imagine like a 5-person little paddle boat, but the reality is that canoe is such a broad word and covers probably hundreds of different varieties of boats, including some that carried 60 people. Like one of the first things that happened when the two sides of the ocean came in contact with each other on Columbus's 4th voyage, I think it was. He's off the coast of Honduras, and he intercepts what we now know was a Maya merchant ship. And this kind of encapsulates the post-classic period in general, because on this single merchant ship, which the Spanish said had 150 people on it, but we think was probably more like half that. On this single merchant ship, apart from the crew, there was also like obsidian from central Mexico. There was dyes from Oaxaca. There's goods from all over Mesoamerica on this one merchant ship off the coast of Honduras, heading back to the northern Yucatan. And there's also, but like getting back to the doubt on laid against the contact with the Caribbean is just that there's no like solid, unambiguous archaeological or historical accounts that will say like for certain 100% the reason that XYZ happened is because Mesoamerica and the Caribbean were in contact. But there's just a few things, like there has been some archaeological remains of Caribbean canoes, like pre-Columbian canoes. That wood obviously doesn't necessarily survive that well, but there are some remains, and from these remains, you know, the whole picture of there's like 2 competing hypotheses about how the Caribbean was settled, and it came in different waves. And one of them is the island hopping hypothesis, where the ships just where the ships and the navigational expertise were not adequate for people from mainland South America to just cross open sea to the Greater Antilles, for example.
Okay.
But there's some nuance with that, because the other hypothesis is that, at least in the latest of the migrations into the Caribbean from mainland South America that we know about, there's archaeological evidence of ships on various islands that show, real quick, the the people that were migrating into the Caribbean were part of the greater Amazonian like group of cultures, I guess. And
Okay.
so these are the same like language families and agricultural complex and life ways as people that were living in greater Amazonia, which is it's more than just the Amazon River. It's a bit like including a bunch of tributaries and nearby river systems.
Sure.
But most of them migrated north into Venezuela, and then 3 times, the Caribbean was the last part of the Americas to be settled. They came from Venezuela into the Lesser Antilles and then the Greater Antilles, and this happened a second time about halfway through the first millennium AD. The people that we call the Taino or Island Arawak, or their ancestors, came to the Caribbean, and their boats that we have recovered are probably similar to the kind of designs that were used on the Amazon River. So there's kind of a thing about like if these ships were adequate for river travel, but not necessarily for open sea, and they just didn't adapt the ship technology, probably because some think it's just because they didn't really have to. Navigating from Venezuela to like Trinidad is not especially difficult with a river going boat.
Yeah.
And then there's a third migration into the Caribbean, which is the Caribs, or the people that we call the Caribs. But they had a technology of straked canoes. And basically straking is when you take a dugout. A dugout is when the canoe is made from cutting down and then hollowing out a tree and bending it with fire, to put it succinctly. You take a dugout and then you reinforce the rim of the canoe with a quote unquote gunwale. I don't think it's technically a gunwale because I don't know the nautical terminology exactly, but basically you put up reinforcements on the side with wood, and that's a straked canoe, and that increases its stability on open water dramatically.
Okay. That makes a
And
lot of sense.
and so there's kind of an idea that you would have used that these people would have been able to cross straight from Venezuela over open ocean to the greater open sea, not really like the Atlantic, but open sea over to the greater Antilles.
Okay. Cool. That is super duper cool. Looks like Riley has a question. So, if they're using a gunnel canoe, is there evidence that they used windward or leeward outriggers, like say Polynesian canoes would have used?
There is like some Spanish accounts that say they had outriggers, but most people don't think that those are accurate. As far as I know, there were no outriggers.
Okay. Awesome. And by the way, we have a lot of people in chat right now. Welcome, everyone. I see there's like 28 people live right now. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them in chat. If you want to hear about me or Pixel, you can type either !about for my background and !guest for Pixels. And if you are a follower of the channel, you have access to emotes these days. So you have access to 3 different emotes. Please feel free to use them. I thoroughly enjoy seeing the emotes clog up chat. And no lurking. It's more fun when you're talking, asking questions, etc. Anyway, shall we hop in?
Yeah, let's do this.
With my glorious, whatever my face is. So, how much do you know about New World? I know I've told you a couple of things, but have you looked into it much at all?
I know almost nothing.
Amazing. So,
Well, I think I watched the first 5 minutes of your stream with Sacerdos, but apart from that, no.
So, the background to this game is through basically an alternate history where everything is exactly the same, except every random ass mystical island that exists off the coast of Europe is actually a real place. It is the island that we are on, the island of Aeternum, of which we can see part of. We can see the southern coast of, basically, and then there's a whole bunch, like, up around here that is not yet available in the game. So, groups that we know have made it to Aeternum throughout human history include, but are not limited to, the Romans, Vikings, Ming China, and King Arthur. Literally just King Arthur.
Like by himself?
I mean, there's presumably some other people with him. But there is a whole document series about King Arthur. Otherwise, we are in a completely and utterly, up until the 15th century, identical to ordinary history. So we get Newton, we get microscopes, we get, like, the entire set of Enlightenment values, whatever the heck that means. And yet, the moment we get to Aeternum, everything seems to go weird, because on Aeternum, nothing can actually die. So you end up with a whole bunch of different types of, like, quasi-undead around. If I run right out here out of town, I can show you what I mean. Newton is 17th century. Microscopes are early 18th century. So, we have not changed much at all. Let's see. What direction? If I go up there, there's probably something. Either that or there's a farm in the area. There's a farm down here. That'll have dead people in it. So yeah, instead of there being indigenous inhabitants of this island, which, by the way, Aeternum is, despite the name, is not in the Americas. It is an island somewhere just to the west of the Azores.
Alright.
So it's just like dropped in the center of the Atlantic. Meanwhile, there are technically no zombies in this game.
Technically no zombies.
Instead, what we have here is what's known as the, I believe these guys are the Lost? No, these guys are Withered. Sorry. And there are, in fact, 4 different types of people who once were here but since have gone crazy. There are the Withered, who are these. There are the Lost, who are ghosts and wraiths and other spooky stuff. There are the Corrupted, who look like they're wearing red ribbons, but otherwise have some sort of wicked plan to kill people and do stuff. And then there are Guardians, who are people who went unsentient in the first time the island fell apart in indeterminately long past. They're the people who made the giant shattered obelisk over here, basically. And they're skeletons that are animated and do stuff. And those are the majority of the inhabitants of the island. Past that, since the presumably 16th century, people have been consistently coming out to Aeternum in search of fortune and glory, but no one can leave Aeternum, which you would think people would recognize sooner and then stop trying to, like, come back. Because you can't escape. Your boat gets wrecked the moment you try and leave. So we're here, doing stuff, being extremely creepy. And yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to really sum up what else it is, because that's truly the circumstances in which we find ourselves.
So how long have like this particular group that, like, I guess you're playing as been here?
We just got here like a week ago. But some of the people here have said they've been around for over a century. So,
Oh, okay.
some of the NPCs are apparently well over 100 years old.
All right.
Yep. Oh yeah, sorry, there is one other point. In order to get here, we are in fact currently a weird carnival Lands Connect, but we are also a monk, which you can tell because we're tonsured, and that's definitely all you need to be a monk. And we came here under the command of an English conquistador who was dressed up in full Cortez cosplay and immediately died.
So an English conquistador in full Cortez armor?
Yeah, like full on, like the guy on the cover or on the box art that we saw in the title screen. That was the guy we came to New World on his boat.
Right.
So full on Morian breastplate, weird face mask just to really get the beard in place, etc. And as you can see as we're looking around, all the buildings are almost aggressively European.
That's the first thing I noticed, yes.
It's almost painful how European they are. So, while we're in town here, and I am just doing some inventory management, why don't, instead of having to look at all the European houses, why don't you tell us a little bit about late post... what was that? Post-classic, you said?
Yes, late post-classic.
Late post-classic sort of housing architecture, and how some of the cities of the Mexica and the Triple Alliance would have actually looked like on a building level.
I don't know if you know how complicated that question is, because
Let's
there's so many.
do it.
there's even in just like the lake region, there were different materials and different like climate, so people made different houses. But generally, most houses were kind of your typical wattle and daub in like a temperate climate. They would be put on a little terrace in a rural setting. They would be put on a little terrace above the fields, and they're usually just like one room with a hearth and then a balcony, which is where people would work outside if the weather allows it. Mostly the women would work under the balcony and make pottery, or they would weave clothes at the backstrap loom.
Okay.
And then but in a colder setting, this wouldn't be an outdoor working area. They would be inside in a specialized area called the siwakali, or like woman room. Meanwhile, the men would be down in the milpa, and the children would, if they're really young, they would just be playing. And if they're like 7 to 9 years old, then they might be helping their same gendered parent with their respective division of labor. The hearth was kind of, as in most places, I imagine, is kind of the center of living, of like everyday life. But in the cities, it's a little bit different, although from like a social like organization standpoint, both rural neighborhoods and neighborhoods within a city are both considered like similar entities. Like they have the same obligations. So there's not as much of a like really obvious rural and urban divide.
Oh, cool.
At least on that level, like nobles live out in the countryside, they also live in the city. um, uh, People out in the countryside owe obligations, people in the city have obligations, and they're zoned to different temples and schools and sanitation and so on. For this dude asks, how big are these houses? Again, it varies significantly. There's less space in a city, so most houses were like pretty small. I think I've seen something like the hearth room would be like 4 to 6 meters across. But the thing is that there would be like it's not quite the like families weren't organized the same way like that we do it today. A household unit technically would be multiple of these 4 to 6 meter across buildings or rooms, just called kali in classical Nahuatl. And they would all be like organized in I guess a square of four usually 4 of them, because 4 is a nice number in Mesoamerican cosmology. But you would have multiple generations cohabiting in the same household unit. Your grandmother would be in the next kali, like just a few meters away. Your parents usually, and when you got married, you would usually way it might work is you might go over to your bride's family's household unit and you would do labor for them in their fields for a set amount of time, and that's sort of like your dowry. And then you would move out of your kali with your wife or your husband, and then go build a new house somewhere, usually on the paternal side's like unit area. And then your wife gives woman's labor to your family, so it's kind of an exchange of labor. And then there's obviously noble or elite houses vary a bit. They actually, like, internally they're a lot less different from each other than they are from commoner houses. Obviously they're a lot bigger than commoner houses. Some of the like manors are some of the like elite, like the ruling family of an altepet, which is a city state, would have a palace that's like hundreds of square meters. But they were all built in a kind of similar-ish layout, with there would be a courtyard in the middle, and then 6, well, not necessarily 6, but a handful of different rooms along the sides. And these would be rooms where guests might stay or the servants would stay. And then at the far side of the courtyard from the entrance would be where the elite, the noble family itself, would actually live. And
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the basic summary. I mean, there's a lot of variance between commoner housing. It varied dramatically in size from region to region and across time period.
Of course.
I guess one big comparison is like there was also apartment complexes in
Oh, that's
Mesoamerica,
super cool.
especially in the classic period. There was Teotihuacan in the basin of Mexico, and it's kind of a predecessor to the Aztec Empire, but mostly because the Aztec Empire made it that way and wanted to kind of be like them. But they had a big city in the valley of the same name, the Teotihuacan Valley, from 100 BC to about 600 AD. And among the things that they are really known for, and this is kind of something to take with a grain of salt, is people have done a Gini coefficient for Teotihuacan, which is like a measurement of the, or an attempt to measure, I should say, of the wealth inequality of a given area by how much an elite household owns in comparison to your average household. And Teotihuacan was remarkably low on that scale, but a lot of Mesoamericanists take issue with the methodology of using a modern index for a pre-modern city.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to be skeptical of.
But the point is still there that because of this apartment complex thing, people tended to live. There were more than 2,000 of these residential wards in Teotihuacan, and the average person in Teotihuacan had a lot more space, probably 10 times as much space as your average commoner in Tenochtitlan 600 years later. But and they also had flush toilets, but they weren't flush toilets like how we flush showers. There, you would like finish your business and then dump a bucket down, and it would carry it away.
Well, still is something.
But it was very remarkably equal for its area and time, regardless. Like people's skeletons, there was still an elite, obviously, but in the elite burials, the skeletons difference in height compared to the average person's height in Teotihuacan from other burial areas like mass burials. The difference in height is very small, like compared to Roman or Chinese differences. To my understanding, there was not a great difference in nutrition between the elite and the average person. So there, in that case with Teotihuacan, the housing is a bit less, I guess, distinct between social class. But that's sort of more an exception rather than the rule, which also is the case with Tenochtitlan's urban organization in general.
Okay. We're gonna take on cultists, because there's nothing I'd rather do. What? What are these guys doing? I'm gonna take some damage from the corruption here, aren't I? Ow. What are these So these guys are corrupted, by the way. These are a good example of what corrupted things look like.
So same as corrupted things in most
Exactly.
depictions.
They look like demons. I don't know what you wanted from me. Can I kill this? No. No. It's wild that they're being just straight up called cultists, though. I haven't seen that happen yet. For the most part, they've been like ordinary people. But no, this one's just a cult. Surprise. They're doing stuff. Ugh.
People are talking about the musket with the magazine, but I think it's interesting the spear with the magazine.
And then there's just a bison vibing. Wait, look at that guy. Look at the bison.
There's bison?
There's bison. They're just having a good time.
There's bison. Okay.
Do you know, this truly is just... Ow. Thank you, corruption, for like nearly killing me for no reason. Yeah. I mean, did you see earlier when the other player took out the giant tentacle of corruption? Did you see the whole landscape just instantaneously regrow?
I did not catch that, but that sounds interesting.
Chat,
I'm
did you
the
guys see that?
bison is by far the weirdest thing I've seen so far, actually.
There's another one over there. They just have, and one right there. There's a whole bunch of them in this area. Chat, did you guys see that? Okay. Good to know I didn't just make up that nonsense. But it does bring us to a fun environmental history question, because, as you know, that is my gem. Mesoamerica is well known for having volcanoes.
It is.
So, as we can see, you know, with the La Palma eruption ongoing, and if you still go to Iceland, you can see the Geldingadalur eruption is still going. And both of those places leave these giant black marks on the landscape. So, how did Mesoamerican peoples in the whatever period you want to answer that deal with volcanic eruptions, both in sort of a religious sense and in a practical sense of, you know, the ecology gets kind of ruined?
Well, I mean, in the moment, they deal with it the same way anybody else does, and that's run away.
Fair.
But there has been numerous historically significant eruptions, although not necessarily in the historical period as we would consider it, because not all of these people necessarily had written records at the time that an eruption happened, or if they did, then they didn't leave us any. But like historically significant in that, for example, the city I just talked about, Teotihuacan, was basically founded, or at least one hypothesis is that it was founded as a result of the Xitle volcanic eruption in the like 100s, 200s BC in the basin of Mexico, which is the central valley area where Mexico City is today. And this eruption caused several major pre-classic sites in the basin of Mexico to be abandoned, like, for example, Cuicuilco, Tlatilco, and another one whose name I forget, and it's very long. But all these sites, you know, this big volcanic eruption happened, and these sites had to be abandoned, and the refugees kind of came together, or as the story goes, and subsequently, after it was safe, they built the first known period of Teotihuacan. They founded that city. But by the way, we don't know who built Teotihuacan. There's different theories, and there's different people who have laid claim to it.
Okay.
And Teotihuacan is not what the people who lived in that city would have called it, because it's derived from what the people who migrated into the region later named the ruins.
Fascinating.
But in any case, that's one example of the volcano being important. But there's also a couple other eruptions, like down in El Salvador.
Yeah, I remember that one. I was doing some research for it. It's like, what, 6th century? And it, like, displaced 100,000 people or something completely bonkers.
Yes, the Ilopango eruption.
Yes, that one.
So the actually one of the interesting, there's a couple interesting things about it. Is the first thing is that there's like cultural memory of this eruption among the Lenca people, who like, although the soil there is good because of volcanic soil, they like have this this cultural memory that leaves them less inclined to settle that area in large numbers. Like something bad happened there.
Amazing.
And in addition to that, the Ilopango eruption gave us a Mesoamerican version of Pompeii. Although unfortunately, I forget the name of the site right as it comes up. But you know, a kind of example similar to Pompeii for the classical Italy. We have a case of a site that has been remarkably well preserved by being covered in ash.
Amazing.
But apart from that, there's also like volcanoes have a important like they have a role like in the general cosmology, since people knew even then that that's where they got their obsidian, which they made into weapons. In the There's not as much obsidian craftsmanship in the pre-classic. That really starts to pick up in the classic period, and then the post-classic, it's super refined, and everybody. And this gets back to the trade networks I was talking about earlier. Even a rural commoner has access to obsidian, even if they have to import it from hundreds of kilometers away. This is not the case in the classic period, where they would have to make use of local quarries of chert or flint. But volcanoes become this like important area to gather and I guess mine your tool making material or your weapon making material. And obsidian is kind of conceived as having this like, there's a lot of conceiving of inanimate objects as animate in Mesoamerican perspective, in like, especially in the old days. And obsidian too is kind of like this sort of like an animate entity who's driven by or at least it's one argument that somebody has made, that is driven by a desire to snuff out life, and it's associated with sacrifice. And so the sacrificial knives are made from obsidian. So
that is super cool. Sorry, I was lingering here partly to let you get through that, but also there is extremely strange things happening here. The corrupted rally around some being they refer to as the Tempest. They worship it like some kind of god. So, setting aside from the fact that, despite he says that's something they've never encountered before, Yona somehow learned this out of a book that he owns. Setting aside that question, there's something real funky going on here that makes me very worried.
No. Other than maybe to give us a greater sense of urgency.
The thing that worries me is that there's actually a faction I have not talked about yet in the background lore of this world. In that, Aeternum has another group of entities called the Angry Earth that gave us is apparently living. We haven't really met it yet. I know it's something we can fight later. And has, like, animals and things made out of bark. Like, one word they used to describe it in one journal entry is, they literally are calling it a spray gun. So, very much standard Euro folklore. Ta-da. But what worries me is that if there's a conflict between the Earth and the Tempest, are we doing the most scuffed Chaos Comp ever invented? Is that the direction we're going?
I cannot go. You must do this alone. It will require the sacrifice of part of your soul. Place the pieces of the staff on the ancient altar near the shattered obelisk.
Yay!
Brace yourself. I will be with you in spirit.
Who's ready for this? I'm not. Okay, we're heading off to the Shattered Obelisk, which is the very centerpiece of the world-ish, sort of. You can see, right, there's this giant ring of obelisks all around it, of which we've not found all of them, but you can see them all. And then right in the center, we exploded something, which was not a smart idea, but we did it anyway. So yeah, we're gonna head over here, and then you can get to see the quote-unquote ancient, quote-unquote indigenous peoples of Aeternum.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Oh, it's gonna be a grand time. I am heading the complete wrong direction though, so let's turn ourselves right around and then also stop by looking for... Here, let's just drop it there.
It's always obelisks and stuff. SME.
It's always obelisks. We're just gonna get another... We're just gonna get more obelisks coming up here. But first we're gonna stop and pet a dog, because we need to pet the dog. It is important information.
Makes sense.
The dog's name is Barkimedes, by the way. Which is a 10 out of 10 pet the dog. He's a good boy. He's in the first actual raid we can do. Or he's just... More accurately, he's standing right outside the first raid we can do. Which is an archaeological excavation gone very poorly.
Oh, they do archaeology in the game.
They actually are attempting to do archaeology relatively competently. Right, very 19th century, but that's way more competent than the 18th century. So, not really sure what to make of it. We're gonna stop by the dig site so you can actually take a look at it. And exactly, Raptorus, it is actually a 10 out of 10 S tier name. Truly genius. It does not make the game good. As we are walking through a pine forest. As we are walking, aggressively pet the turkey.
Turkeys?
Aggressively pet the wolf. Yeah, there's turkeys in this game. They're
Turkeys and bison?
Uh-huh. Lots of wolves. Lynxes, which you will see are about the size of tigers. Mountain lions, which are something different from the giant lynxes. And a lot of rabbits. But I happen to know that the turkey is a relatively important bird in Mesoamerica. So, given that we just aggressively petted one, and by which I mean stabbed it with a spear, do you want to tell us a little bit about it? And why I probably shouldn't have done that?
Well, turkeys were domesticated in Mesoamerica. I forget the time frame exactly, but much later than the agricultural complex. Well, herding and husbandry never became quite as economically important as it did in old world societies with cattle and pigs and sheep and so on. Partly because turkeys don't do some of the same things that those animals do. But among the many uses that turkeys do have is the meat, obviously, which was apart from peccaries, which are New World pigs, and they were kind of semi-domesticated. The turkey meat was probably top 3 meat sources, along with fish and peccaries. And the turkey did spread, turkey husbandry did spread to other parts of the Americas, like Oasis America or the American Southwest, whichever name people prefer. Eventually, I don't think it spread as much to South America, where there were different animals like the guinea pig and llamas, obviously.
Okay.
As for dogs, dogs were eaten in Mesoamerica.
Poor Barkimedes.
There were several different breeds of dogs, and as I understand it, there were the different breeds. Some were considered best to eat, and some were considered more, we might see a dog for companionship or for going out hunting together. It does not as far as I know, although they were eaten, it wasn't like a hugely like significant part of the average person's diet. But I have not, to be honest, I have not looked that much into dogs. There is also, because you have to bear in mind, we are comparing dogs as a source of meat to turkeys, peccaries, ducks, fish, deer, rabbit, and
All of those sound more common.
yes. So, and then the thing is with deer and rabbit is they're also kind of semi-domesticated too. Like they put deer in, like there are supposedly some people interpret some murals as Maya women milking deer, but these are kind of it's very abstract. So it's not taken very seriously. But the deer is like hunting deer or keeping deer, raising them is kind of a very common activity. Also, hunting deer especially, and there are some areas that made their living to a great degree off hunting deer, especially in like more semi-nomadic parts of Mesoamerica, which there were a few of those.
There's also asking about guinea pigs as another potential.
Guinea pigs were not.
They're farther south, aren't they?
Yeah, that's more South America. I know what he's talking about though, because there's an unfortunate theory from some time ago that involved guinea pigs as among the only sources of protein in Mesoamerica. That was a very easily debunked source, or not source, idea.
Chat, we are petting the dog.
I see that. This looks more like petting the dog.
The dog also, I think, wants us to get things, right? Woof. Please? Okay. Defeat Star Excavation Ravager. Where? Where can I get the pup? Where? Where is?
To continue on dogs a little bit, there's the Mesoamerican Underworld, which is in classical Nahuatl, it's called Mictlan, Land of Death. There's a lot of symbolism with dogs. Like how dogs can guide you around in the wild in real life. When you die and go to Mictlan, dogs are going to be your guides in the afterlife, so long as in theory you treated dogs well and when you were alive or something. And the one of the major so with the sun when it sets, it goes into the underworld, and then comes back up into our world and then back into Mictlan. And the sun has guides. In our world, it's Venus rises in the morning together with the sun, or Ehekat, which is in sort of an aspect of Quetzalcoatl. And he has his mouth is like a long snout almost, and he shoots the sun across the sky like a blowgun. And then along its trajectory to get to the other side of the world is where the whole thing with the slain warriors from in battle go up to guide the sun. But when it sets, the evening star, it's still Venus, but the evening star is represented by Quetzalcoatl's like evil twin, the Lord Xolotl. And he is a dog-headed, dog-faced god. So just as when humans die and go into the underworld, we have guide dogs. The sun also, when it sets, goes into the underworld and has a dog that guides it through and fends off the obstacles in Miklan.
Okay. That is all extremely cool. And the lesson, I think, is still that dogs are all good boys. Even when they're Quetzalcoatl's evil twin.
Yes.
No, we're not calling it Nega Quetzalcoatl. I refuse.
One thing with his name is that Coat means snake, but it also means twin. They're homophones. So
Oh, amazing.
So Quetzalcoatl, apart from being feathered snake, is also precious twin, as in he's the twin that's the good one.
Well, that makes sense. That was a lynx, by the way. I don't know how well you heard the sound effects, but that was a lynx.
All right. Quetzalcoatl giving cacao. There is a story like that where cacao used to be just for just like god food, and then Quetzalcoatl or some other figure in different Mesoamerican mythologies is the one who gave cacao as a gift to humans. But that's not really like his primary thing. He's basically the guy that sort of creates humans every time the world ends. The world has ended 5 times, or sorry, 4 times. It's gonna end 5 times in Mesoamerican cosmology, and it ends for a different reason every time, but it's always petty and stupid.
You'll love to see it.
And the 5th world, which is the world that we currently lived in, is also going to end, and they know exactly how it is going to end. It's going to end from a big earthquake. But in each world, there's a different guy who's the sun, and or in one case, a different gal who's the sun. When the 4th world ended, for very petty and stupid reasons, after a very short time existing, the 5th world began, and Quetzalcoatl goes down to Mictlan, where the bones of the people of the 4th world are now like being kept because they're all dead. They died.
Fair enough.
Quetzalcoatl goes up to the Lord of Mictlan, and he's going to ask him. The line goes, Lord of Mictlan asks him, like, why have you come here? And the gods are anxious to know what you have planned to do with the bones, basically. And Quetzalcoatl's like, I'm gonna bring the humans back, man. We need to repopulate the world after that whole thing happened.
Again.
And yes, and I come to seek the jade bones which you so honorably guard. Yeah, that's how the line goes. So anyway, so Quetzalcoatl gets the bones, but Mictlan, technically, the Lord of the Underworld, is kind of like, I don't actually understand his motivation for doing it, because most of the time Mictlan technically is kind of a chill guy. Like, he's a god of death, but he's kind of chill.
As you are.
But in any case, either he does it in some versions of the story, or Quetzalcoatl makes a mistake, or something happens on his way out of Mictlan. in the process, Quetzalcoatl drops the bones, and up until this point, up until the fourth world, humans were giants, basically. And after that, he drops the bones, and they all break. And this is why humans are different heights in the fifth world.
Incredible.
So what he does, as you do, Quetzalcoatl shapeshifts into an ant, and
Okay, again, as you do.
he goes and he finds an anthill, and he talks to the ants there, and he's like, "Guys, I need your help. We need to carry these bones up to the surface to bring the humans back." And the ants are like, "Okay, sure, we'll help you out." And this is another one of Quetzalcoatl's epithets: is largest of ants.
Incredible.
So he and the ants bring the bones of mankind back to the fifth world, and Quetzalcoatl gives his blood onto the bones, and this animates them, and this is where humans come back.
Amazing. I love it. We need more ant-trapping stories.
Ants are pretty cool.
They are pretty cool.
Maybe in some versions of Scuro, they're ground up into a powder. There's like dozens of variants. Some of them talk about certain specifics like that, and some of them don't bother.
By the way, these are these skeletons I've been stabbing are what passes for indigenous people? Question mark.
Ah, okay.
These guys are ancient, which is why they're dressed funny and use weird weapons.
All right.
That's pretty much it, right? This whole complex is supposedly capital A ancient. And that's why if you look in here, like there's these two dudes with the weird stuff. The weird headdresses. And stuff. I got nothing.
I mean, like, again, it's almost always like obelisks and pyramids and stuff, but none of it looks very Mesoamerican.
None of it looks pretty anything is the problem. What, that missed? Come on. Sir. Well then. I keep hoping that there's like documents in this area. And there keep thus far not being documents.
Obelisks, well, there are stela. I guess it's kind of like an obelisk, but that's it also, again, Mesoamerica is a big, varied place, which is one of the things that popular like conception gets wrong about it. So, and it covered a fairly substantial period of time too. There's 3,000 years of urban cultures from the time of the first considered to be urban civilizations like the Mokaya culture and the Olmecs, all the way until the Spanish contact in the 1500s. That's definitely a wide span of time, and in that time, some people did make stela, which with written accounts of things, but they're dedicated to that role of having something like described on it, usually like divine affairs, but also human affairs. Which, once we were able to read Maya script, and then once everybody was actually okay with using the decipherment and trusting in the decipherment we came up with, which is only like 85 to 90% of like we can read like 85 to 95% of Maya, but there's a few things that we don't know what they meant.
That's fair. Well, there's a few
but
words in like every language that are just like, what is this?
Yeah. But that's mostly a classic period Maya thing. In the classic period, I don't know if you heard me earlier. Yeah, like in the game, nothing like this. Like I said before, they're whatever these ruins are supposed to be in the game, they do not look very Mesoamerican.
Yeah, that's I think what we kind of settled on is that there are a lot of things happening in this game, and it is almost impressive how few of them are in any way, shape, or form. Actually, by few I mean literally zero. Take any influence from Mesoamerican cultures. It's frankly remarkable.
I mean, I almost appreciate it, because if they did take any inspiration, they would get it wrong or do some stupid trope that's been done thousands of times.
Yep. You're not wrong. I still go back and forth as to whether I think this is the best possible outcome or this is still dumb and stupid and we should have influence from non-European cultures that is not like this. Right, obviously making these buildings extremely Mesoamerican would be bad.
Why is it just casually a tent?
I'll let you know if I find out if there's writing inside here or not. Is there writing inside here? There is no writing in here. Boo. There's just the supply crate. Is there writing over here? I think I hit my friend. I think I hit my friend with that. Oops. No, no writing, no writing, no writing, no writing. No writing to be had. Alright. There's just a tent.
I meant as like an ancient, like, popular conception of ancient stuff, Peter. Like when Mesoamerica is popularly conceived as this like mysterious place where like we don't know that much about it, and the Maya had like contact with aliens or whatever, but and we don't know why they vanished. So and that's obviously all a little bit apart from wrong, it's also kind of insensitive because these people are still around to a good degree.
Say it louder. These people are still alive. Well, not the skeletons. These guys should just be dead. They're cowards for not making these people dead. But the Nahua still exist.
The Maya still exists. Most of the major groups are still around, but there's also, at the same time, it should be said, there are also lots of extinct, undocumented languages.
Yes. Oh yes, for the humans, because the skeletons are notably not produced by humans. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Thank you, achievements. Thank you, random ass achievement text language for being very strange. Oh wow, we are right at the bottom of this thing, aren't we? Huh. This should be interesting. It's making a weird noise.
spooky ancient noises.
And no, it's like spooky Tesla coil hum. There's writing down there. I see it. I see the writing. Maybe we can figure out why there's all this scaffolding. We all know that the Earth is the center of the planet's universe, and it is only fitting that the jewel of our planetary system is the one with such a fantastical island like Eternum on it. If our planet is the center of the heavens, then Eternum must be the center of the planet, located so closely to the equator, and imbued with power as it is. Azoth, the substance found here and nowhere else, is further proof that the primordial Eden of which the scriptures spoke, the place from which all life sprang. I am honored and humbled to be standing at the center of everything and must know what the ancients thought of this phenomenon. Wait, they just confirmed Christianity exists. Oh no. Oh no. This is deeply worrying. Firstly, also, I'm confused on the timeline because, as I said, if I had to take a best guess as to when this is from, or when the game is set, it's like early 18th century? Right? I mean, you would not know it from looking at my outfit. You would not know it at all from looking at my outfit, but that is actually my guess, is that it's early 18th century based off the documents we've seen. And as Riley says, that by that time, in Europe, heliocentrism is pretty well fucking established. So... why there is, I guess, early 16th century, geocentrism still rolling around is deeply confusing. Oh yeah, this does mean that one of the factions in the game is capital H heresy. Probably, maybe.
Well, we'd check off the list.
Exactly. You actually haven't seen the 3 factions yet. While I'm killing random dudes, you may have seen, like, all the other players running around have either a purple name, or a little purple symbol, a green symbol, or a yellow symbol next to their name. That indicates faction allegiance. And the best way I can sum up, like, who and what the factions are is... well, their actual names are the... green is Marauders, yellow is Covenant, and purple is Syndicate. Marauders are pirates without boats. The Covenants are just Protestants. And the Syndicate are the scientists united against ethics committees.
Okay.
If this sounds like a problem, that is because every option in this game has you act like a horrible human being.
I see that. I mean, it is a colonialism simulator. So.
It is a colonialism simulator. I don't know what I expected. Is this the way in? This is the way in. Let's go. Run fast, be good. Oh cool, we can go fishing in these spooky waters. You'll love- oh crap. This is not good. Oh, come on. You die. You die. This is actually quite bad. I should be able to win this though. Everyone's down to low HP. You know, Sosistrus, you might be right. Maybe that journal just happened to be running around for the past, or happened to be laying there for something like 150 years. And it was just accidentally wrong. Shiny. I'm glad we suffered for that. I'm, real glad that we had to sacrifice part of our soul for that. Truly deep characterization coming out of this game. Not even a visible grimace of pain underneath our glamorous mask. Jesus. Yeah. So that was, you know, the unbelievably, generic-looking indigenous, everything in the game.
Yes.
Truly, one could not be more generic if they actively tried. Which is probably the goal, but you end up conflating a whole bunch of markers of just what looks and feels old. I don't know. Obelisks. Big,
Yeah,
weird...
I imagine you're supposed to feel like excited to go learn the mystery of this ancient civilization, but it's just generic and you fight skeletons like you can do in Oblivion. Like,
Yeah, exactly, right? That is the best point of reference, I think, is that Oblivion is the culture upon which the ancients of New World were based. Which is a look. That sure is a choice. Now let's see if we can upgrade our outfit. That is a dramatic improvement on all accounts. How are these? Oh yes, armor like this is often worn by those determined to hunt down heresy, even in Aeternum. Well, I mean that describes me pretty well. Though the heresy is against the good sense of the entire game, and history, not, you know, other people, so, meh. Let's do it. Let's go hunt heresy. Oh sweet, they're fashionable and brown. Oh, Historican, we didn't steal anything. No. We made one of the pieces. We found one of the pieces in a box that we were told where the box was, because Jonas, the guy we were talking to earlier, is the guy who put the box there. And then we very nicely asked the Angry Earth for the third piece. So we didn't steal anything, we just kind of waltzed in and, sacrifice part of our soul? Maybe? As if that has any actual consequences. Exactly, Peter. While I riff on a New World taking primarily inspiration from the Elder Scrolls, you correctly bring up that it doesn't work because this game is explicitly in a historical reality. Which is terrifying. Just for the record, I continue to be terrified by that. No, I can't go into the expedition yet, so I cannot fetch bones for Barchamedes. Sosostris? A good question. a really excellent question that I have no answers to. Because I am going to take a wild guess and say, what is the soul in this game? It's probably not the definitions of souls proposed by, Maimonides or Avicenna or Aquinas borrowing from Avicenna or the entire alchemical tradition deriving itself off of also Avicenna, but also some other people. So, I'm going to take a wild guess and say it's not that, and then what it is a big old question mark. Also, there's a portal to not hell, where the corruption comes from.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh. I have to be level 45 in order to beat it up. Right, in the medieval conception, souls are notoriously tricky to pin, and early modern, this will continue to be true. Souls are just notoriously tricky to pin down, because you have to deal with the fact that there is an intelligence that is divorced from the physical body, that is immortal, that is reunited from God, but is not derived directly from God, it is created, and also is not an angel, because that is an intellect that is something different, but also might have a spark of the divine in it. So, everyone has different thoughts about it. Do any of the Mesoamerican traditions have a particularly developed idea of the soul?
Oh yes. It is pretty complicated, and of course there's some variance, but people have different like a soul is made up of different components in the Mesoamerican concept, and this is partly the reason that when most people died in Mesoamerica, the typical way to dispose of the dead was to burn them, was cremation, because when something is burnt, when a dead person is burnt, a certain part of their soul is carried away, and that's the part that gets to go to Mictlan.
Okay.
But there is also a there are different versions of the afterlife. Not everybody goes to Mictlan. For example, if you drown or you die from waterborne illnesses, you could be buried instead of burnt. And instead of going to Mictlan, you go to Tlalocan, and Tlaloc is he's the rain god, but he does a little bit more than just rain. And in Tlalocan, it's kind of it's like I said, it's another afterlife where things are a little bit different. There's no alcohol, so you can't
Tragic.
you can't drink, and you go there because a different part of your soul was destroyed when you drowned or died because of water, so you fall into the grasp of a different like when you're born and when you die, there's a certain deity that's attributed as being in control of that day, of that period of the night, of that month or week on the calendar. And when you're born, your mother fought a battle against that god on that day, essentially to give birth to you.
Unbelievably badass. Just gonna punch a god to go give birth.
Yes, and but that's the god that gives you part of your soul. Like when you're born on a certain day, a part of your soul is contributed by the god that rules that day. And when you die, again, there's different gods that have control over different aspects of that stuff, and that's why you go to different places in different ways when you die. Also, to get back to the childbirth thing, the like how men, when they die in battle, get to go help guide the sun across the sky. Women also get to do that, but their battle is childbirth. So when they fail in their trial against the gods to give birth, they also get to guide the sun. But instead of doing it during the daytime, they go into Mictlan and help the dog dude guide the sun there.
Nega Quetzalcoatl.
Yes. It should also be said, though, as this is always an important caveat that cannot be forgotten when talking about Mesoamerica in general, is there are different takes on this sort of stuff, and some of the takes have survived a bit better in oral tradition or in what's left of the written tradition. And there's going to be different ideas of, not only different names for these concepts, but also completely different mechanisms for how these things work in the first place. The best understood Mesoamerican culture of the post-classic is the Aztecs, or I say that, but when I say Aztec, I mean something a bit different than what most people are thinking. Aztec specifically is three groups who called themselves the Mexica, that everyone has probably heard about, the Ocoa, and the Tepaneca. And these three people are the three ethnicities that populated the three city-states that make up the Triple Alliance. So when we say Aztec, we mean these three people, and their tradition of things has survived the best. So, and Central Mexico at the time was kind of a cultural hegemon. So what happens is that we end up generalizing Mesoamerica a little bit by the example set by the Central Mexican or Aztec conception of things.
Okay.
Which sometimes is fine, because these people were in contact with each other for thousands of years in some cases, and a lot of the same concepts repeat themselves. Tlaloc himself has a lot in common with other rain gods like Chac in the Maya world, or Zawi in Oaxaca, the Mixtec version of him. And then other times, a group will just be inexplicably different.
Fair enough. A familiar feeling.
Indeed.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a disclaimer that makes a lot of sense across time, place, region, culture. Of just, the materials we have access to are not the same thing as the full set of beliefs and diversity of opinions that would have existed. And pretending otherwise would be very, very foolish.
Yes.
So as long as we just kind of signpost who we're talking about and when we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. Like when I talked about Mictlan before, in a lot of central Mexico, you can just walk to Mictlan. You don't have to die. If you go deep enough into a cave, you might eventually get to Mictlan. You just can't come back out. Like there's no coming back from death.
Hysterical.
Right? So, but and so while Mictlan in a central Mexican conception has 9 levels, and the Lord and Lady of the Underworld sit at the bottom of those 9 levels. Other cultures, like the Mixtecs, they might only have 7 levels, and the Lord and Lady, sometimes the Queen of the Underworld is actually a lot more important than her husband. Like the Zapotec people, Pitao Shu, whose name basically means the force within earthquakes. Although she's also called Shonasi Kekua, which is just Queen Death, which are both great names. And you might think, again, like with the Death God, you might think that they're just malevolent entities dead set on destroying life.
Nah.
But they're actually very like they actually contribute to agriculture because Queen Death pushes plants up through the earth from below so that people can grow food. And all she asks in return is that when you bury people, basically people turn into skeletons when you bury them because the underworld people consume them. They eat the flesh off of it.
Oh, that's metal as hell.
Yes. But then when we get to the Maya conception, the Yucatan Peninsula has all these cenotes in them, or sonots, however the Maya pronunciation goes. It's not cenotes, but the underworld in the Yucatan is like the real, like it's a real place underneath them because the cenote network is so vast and it's mostly still unexplored today. And so the underworld in the Maya conception, or Xibalba, is a watery place. It's a place where like fish came from and stuff. So, already there's 3 different ideas for how the underworld works.
Yup. Cool. As I go looting more places. Which, by the way, they did just straight up call it looting in one of the documents, so fair play to them for being bold enough to say the bare minimum. What? Wolf. Wolf. I am so many levels stronger than you. Why did you do that? Theoretically, they're supposed to stop attacking once I'm sufficiently stronger. Because who likes wasting their time? But this game doesn't listen. Anyway, what I'm doing right now is actually trying to grab the three astrolabes from these 3 towers. Because these... supposedly, that has something to do with how everything works. It's not totally clear. It's not at all clear. Oh boy. Warning us against the creepy crawlies, that's reasonable. But apparently, according to the last journal entry we got, these guys have been defeated by standing on top of a waist-high platform. Powerful. Truly powerful AI right here.
How did nobody think of this?
You're just gonna lay down now? Okay. Yeah, have fun. What's... Well, here we go again. When in doubt, use the hysterically overpowered spear. Right, actually, when I first started, I thought spears were the worst weapon type in the game, because they just weren't fun. But their abilities are extremely good. Anyway, so apparently what happened here is that when people first got to Eternum in the current wave of settler colonialism, everything was fine and normal and okay. And then someone had the bright idea of trying to do experiments on the central obelisk, and exploded it. And that made everything go bad.
Okay.
Because turns out they did in fact do the classic European thing of, when in doubt, use explosives to excavate. For science.
Well, the classic European thing is also tampering with things that they don't understand how it works and ruining it.
Exactly. So, congratulations, they did the bare minimum of maybe this was a mistake. But it's super... something... oh, hey, look. No, that's just another wolf. This is also... not where I was supposed to be. It's supposed to be here. There we go. Anyway, it's something that strikes me as just super weird about what this game does, is they are simultaneously going like, oh yeah, new world, age of exploration, whole bunch of new discoveries, all this cool stuff, we promise, it's going to be great. Also, this is like a ongoing apocalyptic scenario.
I mean, from one perspective, for some people it was an apocalyptic scenario.
Oh, true. But it's so, regrettably, you know, the atrocities of ongoing colonial devastation, just not something that exists in the popular imagination of, like, New World and the settlement thereof until extremely recently.
Yeah, it's been romanticized and
Romanticized to hell and back, I would say. And so, it's just this weird dichotomy where simultaneously, you know, we are getting the exact things you would expect from Colonialism Simulator New World, and then also getting this weird, like, post-apoc or ongoing apocalypse of, oh no, well, actually, it's super gross, now that I'm thinking about it. Because the apocalypse is, oh no, the entire history of human settlement has come back to attack us. You know, all the people whose stuff we were looting are now defending their stuff. How tragic. You know, I don't feel good about that. I feel like one doesn't need to be an expert to think maybe this is a bad idea. You know, there's a couple more things in the area. Let's clean up these quests, and then we'll go back. I think we're gonna clean up these couple quests, head back into town, turn them all in, go talk to Jonas, and then I want to show you Halloween Town, because Halloween Town is just a place in this game.
okay.
It's real funky. I don't know what they were thinking, but we do have to go there for an optional quest anyway, so, meh. But yeah, from what you've seen of the game so far, is there anything that stands out to you besides its sheer incoherence?
I mean, what stands out to me aside from sheer incoherence is just how generic it looks and feels. Like it's a very bog standard MMO.
Really, the only thing going for it is that the UI is not an absolute disaster.
And the world building is weird.
Interesting. I can't believe they just straight up confirmed that the scriptures, and therefore presumably, you know, the creation of the scriptures, and therefore presumably Christianity, are all just, like, things that exist. that they did not feel the need to acknowledge at any point prior to this. I truly cannot believe that. Right, I mean, I'd been wondering for a long time what they were going to do with, you know, quote-unquote religion. I mean, by which I mean specifically Christianity, because they've been saying, or they've been suggesting it, so long from the very beginning when they acknowledged, you know, Newton and Judaism both exist. But then they just went for it. The absolute worst possible choice. And they just went for it. Because, yeah, what that means is that upon arriving in Aeternum, literally everyone, since it is, like, thus far, greater than 90% Europeans, I would say, everyone just, like, forgot to be Christian. And that's the best way I can sum it up. It's like everyone just kind of arbitrarily forgot to be Christian. Which is not something one usually expects to have happen. Don't really know what to do with that. They mentioned the scriptures. Right, they said it must be eaten as in the scriptures, which I suppose could just be more Judaism, but I really don't think so. Sheesh. Anyway, the other thing I want to talk about with this, we've covered a lot of the things I hoped we would, which was great. But one thing that I wanted to talk about is the complete absence of NPCs that can be interpreted as anything resembling Indigenous American. Because here's the deal, the one big change that seems to have happened with the discovery of Aeternum, apart from people get stuck there, and also the world might be ending, is there is nothing in the game except for one map at the very, very beginning that suggests that the American continental system was extensively explored or settled by Europeans.
I mean, this island has turkeys and bison.
I mean,
I don't see why they couldn't have Mesoamerican or other Native American people.
Exactly. Right, there's no reason for it, but I'd be curious, I guess this is potentially moving outside of your wheelhouse, so, certainly only answer this if you, feel able, but is there much of a history of, you know, Mesoamerican peoples being brought back to Europe, or either through enslavement, or as quote-unquote curiosities, which is gross and awful wording, that I know was occasionally used anyway.
It did happen, yes. It even happened like not just to Europe, but also to other parts of the Spanish Empire, like the Philippines.
Okay.
But like outside of Mesoamerica, like there's the whole thing with Tisquantum, or Squanto as we call him
Yep.
here. Like he traveled in Europe for a time. Apparently he got the thing about burying fish to fertilize the field or whatever from Europeans, and told that to Europeans to help them grow corn.
Incredible.
So something like that. But apart from that, we don't know that much about them, but there were in the initial like during the initial voyages, like people were brought back to Spain, as well as objects were brought back from Spain. Like as early as like 1522, there was already an exhibition in the Netherlands showing off things that they took from Mexico. This is like scarcely a year after the fall of Tenochtitlan, and there's already looted artifacts being on display in Europe. But apart from that, there was also like, because what you kind of have to think about too is how, like, all of a sudden, the King of Spain just has these new territories fall into his lap that he knows very little about. So he kind of commissioned like studies to learn about what was there and what the people were like. This gave us the Codex Mendoza, which was invaluable for reconstructing the territory and provincial system of the Aztec Empire, for example. And that's great and all, but it ended up, even though the Spanish king commissioned it, it ended up in England because the English kept basically stole it. And thankfully they didn't sink the ship, they just looted the cargo. But anyway, in addition to that, he also had like one of the interesting things is ball players from Mesoamerica, like who played the Mesoamerican ball game, came back to Europe and demonstrated the game with rubber balls that bounce that no European had ever seen. They played the game, but we don't know that much about like the individual players' names or whatever.
No early celebrities.
Or like what happened to them after they played the game for the king. Well, maybe some people know, but I don't.
Fair enough.
But apart from that, there was also thousands of slaves taken from various parts of the Americas that ended up back in Europe for one reason or another. And sometimes they would get back to Europe and like nominally be like the church or the monarchy or something would intervene and be like, what the hell are you doing? Let these people go or whatever. But it still wasn't a good situation. Like the best most of them hoped for was some other form of servitude or dying from one cause or another, from disease or something like that.
Truly the thrilling outcome either way.
Yeah, and then there was also people not from Mesoamerica but are commonly thought to be Mesoamerican, who were drawn by this, I forget the European artist, but they were brought back and this guy did sketches of them, and and Europeans didn't know the difference from one part of the Americas to another, so they were just called, these guys are from Mexico, but they were, based on the drawings and what we know today, they were probably from South America. So there's definitely examples of this happening, and there's the odd, few and far between example of a Native American person that went to the old world, went to Europe, and then came back, like Tisquantum. And then in the case of the Philippines, there's also the, since that was part of the Spanish Empire, it was actually administrated from Mexico. It was part of New Spain at some point. I forget if it was initially, if it was like that right away, or if it became that after some period of time. The colonial period is not generally what I focus on, but the Philippines was administrated from Mexico, and that's where the Manila galleons would cross the Pacific to bring silver from Mexico to the Philippines, where it would be traded to China. But sometimes the ships would carry people from Mexico, including like there when the Spanish conquered Mexico, they had a lot of allies in the process, and one of their like privileged like local elite that they kind of like favored over other people was the Tlaxcaltecas.
Yes.
And some Tlaxcaltecs seem to have ended up on a galleon destined for the Philippines, where they fought as part of a Spanish expedition against local sultanates. Like they helped the Spanish fight Muslims there. And in the Mesoamericanist circles, it's kind of like, oh, this maybe happened, but some people from the Southeast Asia like sphere of studies have kind of like corroborated it a bit, so I feel a little bit more confident about it. To get back to the conquest of Mexico, though, I think it can often be it is often perilously misunderstood as to how it happened. Like, there are basically two extremes. The first extreme is that the Spanish military technology was so good that these like 500 guys walked in and were like space marines or whatever, and just kind of like soloed these big armies and cowed them into surrendering. And then the opposite extreme, because we all know that one's like nonsense, but the opposite extreme is Cortez lands and like tells everybody, wow, the Aztec Empire is so brutal, you guys should revolt. And then just this magic white man's words are enough to get the entire empire to rise up and revolt.
That's not better.
Indeed, it is not better. So the thing is, like, with the nuance with it that a lot of people don't really get into unless they like actually start digging for themselves into Mesoamerica's history, pre-contact history, is that Tlaxcalan, which was a republic, was completely surrounded by provinces of the Aztec Empire, and we do analyze them as provinces. Tlaxcalan was being completely surrounded and constantly under siege, was basically also constantly like fanning the flames of dissent and unrest in neighboring Aztec provinces in order to like give them space to breathe. So they would encourage, maybe directly support, but we don't know for sure, but they would encourage, they would back, they would grant asylum to dissidents in neighboring Aztec ruled territories. So when Cortez lands in Zempoalan, he's landing in an area which has revolted countless times already. This is a volatile region. With or without Cortez, this place, this like kind of like 1/4 of the Aztec Empire has always been like kind of loosely controlled. It's been conquered and reconquered several times. And then what kind of happens is that this quarter of the empire revolts and gets Spanish backing and Tlaxcaltec backing, and they go on a direct campaign towards Tenochtitlan to cut the head of the snake or whatever. But and then along the way they make some more allies, because in Texcoco there was a secession crisis and people weren't happy with the Mexica appointed speaker. So there was like a civil war there, and Cortez gains the support of the faction that's contesting the claim of the Mexica candidate.
Jeez.
So there's a lot of factions involved in this, and then when Tenochtitlan falls, to this quarter of the empire and Spanish, like 600 Spanish explorers. The rest of the empire was kind of just like, okay, so what happened? Like a lot of the Aztec imperial provinces had every reason to be loyal to Tenochtitlan because the Aztecs had this strategy of basically they would come into an area and they would find like some local obscure group that was kind of like downtrodden, and they would make friends with that group and
Yeah.
prop up this obscure town into a regional capital, and with Aztec backing you would be able to govern this territory. Just send tribute once in a while. At least in some provinces, not all provinces work this way. But the
power of Azoth and that of a pure given sword. You should
so these like loyalist areas were still, it's not like the entire empire rose up, is basically what I'm getting at. Is a lot of the other provinces were just kind of, were still loyal to Tenochtitlan, had every reason to be loyal to Tenochtitlan, had no problems with Tenochca rule or Aztec rule, because in a lot of cases the tributary requirements were pretty like tame, like just maintain the roads for us, please. When our army comes down that way, have food ready for us, please.
Yeah,
You know?
that's not so bad as far as being an Imperial Dominion could be. That could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit tighter in some areas. Like if your province was strategic enough for the Aztecs to directly intervene in your affairs, they absolutely did. They had no qualms about doing it. Like there was this border contested region called Ostoman, where where instead of just like taking tribute, the Aztecs killed everyone in the town and then resettled it with colonists from the capital region, because
Ooh.
they wanted to exert as much control over this area as possible, because it was a route of communication, and B, it was right next to one of their rivals, the like number 2 big kid on the block, the Rechequa, which unfortunately is more popularly known in academia and in popular knowledge as the Tarascan state, but the T word Tarascan is it's very problematic. I don't know. I wish it was not so popular in academia as it is, because it's one explanation for the name basically alludes to mass rape.
Oh, that's not good.
So I don't know why we use it, but anyway. So there's this like weird oxymoron between, like, people will say, oh, the Aztecs weren't really an empire. They controlled territory so loosely, and barely controlled it at all. And yet somehow simultaneously, while being this entity that only loosely controls their subjects, they are also so brutal and horrible that everybody revolts the instant somebody shows up and has that idea. Like it can only be one or the other. They can't really be both to make sense.
No, it cannot.
So when Tenochtitlan fell, the Spanish kind of just replaced Tenochtitlan. They basically say, you're paying tribute to Mexico City now, essentially. To like put it in simple terms, like to some of these frontier provinces, all that changed for the first like 25, 50 years was the name of the people they were paying tribute to.
Okay.
So there was this vassal transfer of, like, there was the people who revolted and joined the Spanish on their march toward Tenochtitlan, and then the rest of the empire, which either had taken, which didn't take a side, or maybe had Aztec sympathies, just kind of just kept paying tribute to Tenochtitlan and told the Spanish, here's what we owed the Aztecs, we're going to keep owing you this, right? Except they would fudge the numbers a little bit so they would pay a bit less.
Sure. Who wouldn't?
And so what actually, like people have this idea of 1521, the fall of Tenochtitlan being like the end of Mesoamerica. The fall of Tenochtitlan is the total and complete conquest of Mesoamerica. But what really follows is like 50 to, in some cases, 200 years of still ongoing warfare and still ongoing like legal disputes, because while the Spanish replaced Tenochtitlan in name, they had a very different legal system. And the first, like a lot of the hundreds of codices that we have that give us insight into pre-Columbian life, because they were composed in a pre-Hispanic way, were lawsuits. Like they were explaining to the Spanish, we have been on this land for 500 years. These are the rights we've always had. Where the hell are our rights, dude? Like this is what we paid these guys. This is what we're going to keep paying you. You can't ask for this. Like, and it's these lawsuits that have offered, like, because of them, we know how Mesoamerican legal systems worked, and we know how, we know what goods different regions produced and exported. Like, it's ironically very useful for us.
I adore that.
Down the line, yeah.
You gotta love it. Because super developed legal cultures are great. And far better than whatever the heck this game thinks counts as law, which is pick a faction and pray. Because, yeah, all the towns in this game, First Light, Windsward, Monarch's Bluffs, Everfall, etc., are nominally governed by NPCs, but then are actually controlled by the factions, who will then... Right, like right here, this is in conflict because my faction, Purple, has done enough random crap in order to trigger a miraculous revolt around the definitely extant population against the Marauders. And so now people are flocking from all over to fight over who gets to be in charge of the city.
I see.
Note, there is, as you may have noticed, outside of the cities, there is no NPC population. I don't know how we're triggering revolts. Like... It is truly, people are coming in order to do violence. And their sole purpose with coming in and doing stuff is to try and do violence. And that is what passes for law. So if I turn on PvP, well, everyone here is Syndicate, so I can't attack them. But I could turn on PvP, and as soon as I'm a little bit outside of this little settlement, I would be able to just randomly start stabbing people and it would be fine.
Well done. You closed the breach. I can taste it. Corruption will not spread unchecked anymore. Oh yes. A side effect of the process. Like it or not, you'll be able to taste corruption soon too.
Ew.
Like
why was that a detail they put in?
With decay, followed by an aftertaste of blood. It quite ruins dessert, I'm afraid. Don't say I didn't warn you now, but you get used to it. Sort of. There is just one more thing you need before you can be appointed as a soul warden. It's been so long I can hardly remember being anything else. Let's see.
I'm sure we'll have no animations to acknowledge this.
Shivering with a bone-deep cold, feeling like I'd never be warm at a hot gym. A vessel you'll use to encase your soul, protect it. A cold vault.
Another ancient temple. We're not going to go there today.
To get one is a cold vault in the earth. It was once a sacred vault, but long abandoned even during my prime. Now, an excavation. It's the only place I know to get an empty hot gem. You'll need your staff to gain entry. Good luck.
Oh boy. So in the Amrine excavation, which is the... Oh wait, that's the raid that I need to do. Somewhere in that area, there is apparently the thing I need to do to progress the main story. Which is cute, but it's not what I'm gonna do. Where is this? Over here. So, what say we go visit Halloween Town and then call it a stream?
Alright, let's go to Halloween Town.
Hooray. Where
I wonder how modern American Halloween Town is going to be in this setting.
It's like... It keeps the same vague vibe of, like, Waddle and Daub nonsense, but I mostly call it that because it is a place where it's perpetually nighttime and there are ghosts. Just hanging out. Having a good time. Sleepy Tallow. Pin this objective. Thank you. Because the main group of the Lost that you see, so one of the 3 types of undead, are formerly pirates, and now also still pirates, but now pirates that cannot die. They upgrade to eventually become what the game calls Geists, which is just a very bad spelling of the Old English word ghast, or ghost. And so there is a spooky, spooky town. Which is gonna be a good time. Should be the road up this way.
I will be right back.
Okay, sounds good. How you guys doing, chat? Because we have covered a lot of ground today. Like, we have covered so much. When Pixel gets back, the last thing, don't let me forget, that we are going to talk about is, you know, what does the complete absence of Mesoamerica mean? Good. I'm glad you're having a good time listening. Right, because it is really important that this is America without consequences. Right, that is what New World is secretly being and refusing to acknowledge. And so talking about the complete absence of the incredibly big urbanized population that, you know, extreme violence was inflicted upon for 200 years, at least. Kind of a big deal. Now, chat, can we get a This Is Halloween? It's only like, what, November 3rd? November 2nd. It's totally still Halloween. Don't worry about it. Thank you, chat. I was not joking. Reed. Someone messaged Reed. Yeah, no, Peter, I saw it earlier. It's just we weren't there yet. Because Reed does need to see this. Because Reed is doing research on this. So... if someone could message him, that would be super cool. Cause, oh boy. You need a more graveyard-flavored graveyard? Hooray. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will just hang out here until Pixel and or Reed get here, because we're in Spooky Town.
I return.
You return. Welcome to Halloween Town.
Looks Halloweeny.
This is, what is it? Sleepy Tallow, which is definitely not just Sleepy Hollow, we promise. But it is chock full of ghosts. Absolutely hilariously full of ghosts. Note, these ghosts are also not dead.
Right.
All these graveyards are not of dead people. We promise. Because nothing can die in Eternum. Things might come back as lost, or as withered. These guys are lost, by the way. The dead pirates, who are still pirates, but now dead, are lost, and then the more powerful lost are these famine geists.
They just decide to hang out at a cemetery.
Yeah, again, a cemetery to the totally dead people that definitely exist in this world. I truly have no words for how questionable this actually is. We're gonna switch over to the rapier because we need to be more stylish, and we just got a fancy rapier. Look at that go. Also, there are big black wolves. Who kinda suck, I won't lie. I'm hoping... Ow. I am hoping that Reed makes it in, because we messaged him, because Reed is doing research into graveyard portrayals in video games.
Oh,
And isn't this a doozy?
an internally inconsistent graveyard. Just for Halloween.
Exactly. Right? There's a reason I call this Halloween Town, because it is truly the most sense anyone can make. Silliest weapon. Oh. We have a gear change of silliest weapon. I mean, the worst choice you could make me do, Riley, is Life Staff. I wonder if we can do Life Staff and Shield. We cannot do Life Staff and Shield. Regrettably. Shame. We can do Life Staff and Hatchet, though, which I have no skills for. I wonder if we can do Hatchet and Shield. Does it let us do Hatchet and Shield? It does not let us do Hatchet and Shield. What is the point of giving us a shield if we can only use it with one type of sword? Like, honestly. By the way, I am just going to rely on my stats to carry me through this, because this is insane. I have no abilities right now in an MMO. This is not a good idea. Hang on, do we spin... Sorry, we spin to win with a hatchet. I didn't even notice that, but we 100% spin to win. Just... Alright, sure. I could do the giant anime hammer. You're right, that is sillier than the hatchet. I'm sorry. I regret my mistake immediately. Look at how good this weapon is. And good, I mean absolutely atrocious. Oh boy. Video games. Alright. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk with you about, Pixel, because we are coming up on the end of the stream, is sort of our consequences when thinking about New World and games more broadly. Thinking about the incredibly noticeable absence of Mesoamerica in depictions of our, I guess in this game, early modernist, but generally speaking, medievalist imagination. Because, right, I think you'll agree, right? It's noticeable just how little there is.
Yeah. You mean, like, the absence of Mesoamerica in media specifically?
Yeah, especially historical games, because that's something I do in particular, but in media broadly, I think makes sense, because
Right.
there's so much missing. And as you've talked about, right, a whole lot of really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really nothing but good to be gained from having Mesoamerica be represented in games where it makes sense for them to be represented. Because like a lot of people are going to get what little knowledge they might get about Mesoamerica, they're very likely to get from video games or
Yep.
movies. And I guess I would say that there is definitely a responsibility on the part of a game developer or movie director or whatever to, you know, that not necessarily get everything right, but like I think it's important to like emphasize like that this world that used to exist like mattered and was important and is interesting for more reasons than just because it was conquered, which is, I mean, the one of the big reasons that I mainly focus on pre-Columbian history is because I wanted to study Mesoamerica as separate from the context of the conquest as I could, because when people talk about Mesoamerica, probably 4 out of 5 times it's just to talk about the conquests and have this nuanced conversation about colonialism and about like did the Aztecs deserve it, or did the Spanish like colonialism bring any benefits, or
Those, you say nuanced discussion, but oh boy, those are not nuanced topics.
I say nuance with heavy sarcasm.
Good.
But these are conversations that happen repeatedly on the internet, probably every day, hundreds of times, and it's the only thing people will know about or pretend to know about Mesoamerica is the conquest. And when the only way that Mesoamerica gets portrayed in media is in the context of it being destroyed, people get this. What happens also is that people get this idea of the, like, the mysterious vibe that I kind of talked about earlier, where it's like this alien so far removed from us and our history, so to speak, that we just don't know a lot about them, either because it was all destroyed, supposedly, or there just isn't that much to know. Like these people didn't contribute much to the human history or whatever. This is sort of the consequences, I would say, is that people don't know a lot about it, so they think there isn't much to know about it, or that there's a reason that we don't portray them. If it doesn't show up, maybe it's because it's boring, or because it was so primitive and they came up with nothing new or whatever. And if we had more portrayals of Mesoamerica removed from the context of conquest, or at least if it's going to be in a conquest adjacent period, if it like focused on an unabashedly pro-Mesoamerican like perspective, or primarily Mesoamerican perspective, at least in contrast to a European one, it would do a lot of good for these, from an educational perspective, because people, I think, might read these quote unquote nuanced arguments, and like they might know like this person is fucking bonkers, or doesn't know what they're talking about, but they don't necessarily know enough themselves to actually say anything about it against them.
Of course.
And so partly, like, what I'm really concerned with is communication of like about Mesoamerica, because the academics in Mesoamerica are like, they make so little effort to like tell people about this stuff, and we just kind of like share papers with each other, and then meanwhile most of the school system is still teaching things from like 50 years ago, and as a result, people that might be really interested in Mesoamerica, if they gave it a chance, will never give it a chance, or have an opportunity to.
Awesome.
So I think, it doesn't even have to be like 100% historically accurate. I don't think games have to be 100% accurate, but it would be great if, like, more often, like, even something as small as like including Mesoamerica, and it's not the Aztecs, it's not the Maya. Have somebody else show up, and that immediately like expands what might get talked about at some point.
Cool.
As for a good series set in Mesoamerica, as Sesostris asked, there are a couple that have come out. Like, I haven't seen them myself, but Maya and the Three and Onyx Equinox, which I think are a bit like, they can be well researched, but I'm not sure about them as like a introduction, I guess, because they kind of focus especially on the mythology, on the cosmology, because it's a fantasy thing, and that's cool. But I think it unintentionally has this effect of almost perpetuating, like, mystifying and sensationalizing Mesoamerican religion. Not that they're problematic series necessarily. Again, I haven't seen them, but for my opinion of what would be a good one, is like, there are some like potential there for like a historical, like, fully, it doesn't have to be fantasy, is sort of what I'm getting at, is Mesoamerica does not need to be fantasy to be interesting, which is a take that I have come across a lot of times when, like, somebody will ask, you know, why not put Aztecs into this? Somebody else will be like, you know, well, because it's not fantasy, or like it wouldn't make sense for them to have, like, in Age of Empires 2, for example, they have the Mesoamerican civilizations in Age of Empires 2 have wheeled siege weapons and stuff, and there are these. I once came across this post that was like, you know, we need historical accuracy in our video games. You can't have the Mesoamericans building siege weapons. Never mind that siege warfare was a thing in Mesoamerica, just not
It's
specifically
just not
with the,
wheels.
just not with those specific weapons. But like, and his solution to the problem was, and mind, this is an argument trying to make a more historically accurate game, was he wanted the monks in Age of Empires 2 to be able to call down meteors from the sky.
What?
As a replacement for siege weapons.
What?
So
Run that one
And-
by me again, but slowly.
he wants the monk unit in Age of Empires 2 to be more historically accurate for a Mesoamerican civ, to be able to call down rocks from the sky on enemy walls and stuff.
For well, setting aside the small problem of the monk unit in Mesoamerica,
Yes.
I guess we'll just set that aside and let that be. Thank you, Klaus. Ripulio.
But like the thing is, like, again, there actually was siege warfare, and there is something to work with that's historical, but people have engaged with Mesoamerica so little and think that they know stuff about it to just instantly say they can't have siege weapons in this video game, so we better replace it with like this fantasy concept. A Tikal Kalakmul political drama, I would watch that. A Game of Thrones set in kind of thing, set in like the classic Maya period. That sounds like it could be a good.
That sounds like it could be a
starting
great
point.
time. That sounds like it could be an amazing time.
And you could maybe there are some like historical dramas set in the Conquest specifically. There's one made in Spain that's just fucking awful. But there's
Hilarious.
there's one made in Mexico that's a little bit better. Like one of the most common like ideas of Mesoamerica in popular conception is like with fashion, is that people think that like Mesoamerican people were like half naked but dressed in like big ass feather headdresses all the time, or like really colorful outfits, but like most of the time it was like basically just fancy. It's not really like a toga, but like it's similar enough in its role, I guess, that I'll call it a kind of like that. It's called a tilmat. And it's a very simple just cloak that goes over your shoulder, and sometimes it was colored and sometimes not, but like the clothing was very simple and very plain most of the time. But this idea that has spread is this like weird nonsensical like feather dress stuff, and that's in the Spain series about the conquest. Everybody in Meso is either like completely naked or dressed like that.
Amazing.
But you know, apart from the conquest period, you could do. There's a really cool web comic, sort of like an alternate Aztec empire made by Camazotz, and it's very well researched. There's also another web comic that's based on Zapotec mythology, and I now forget the name, but it was like Black Codex or something like that, or Codex of the Black, but it's about Donahi.
Okay.
So if you Google Donaji, you'll probably find it if I misremembered the name. So those are well researched and generally pretty good. if you want to get out of like series and into like other forms of media. I guess apart from the classic Maya political drama Game of Thrones thing, the more I think about that, actually, the more I want to see that happen. You could do like something similar with another political drama show. Could be like the Republic of Tlaxcalan, and have like a senatorial kind of like debate while they're at war with the Aztec Empire without Cortez in the picture. You know, so some historical fiction there. You could do something set in like, there's this event in Mixtec history which people have unfortunately taken to calling the War in Heaven. Basically, there's this handful of pre-Columbian codices that discuss events from the late 10th and late 11th centuries, which is further back than we can mostly get historical sources in pre-Columbian history than most other cases, except for the classic Maya. And it's sort of like myth history because the like fully historical take is that these dynasties are basically competing after the fall of this empire. But
Okay.
like it got mythologized because the dynasties are like associated with elements. So there's like an earth dynasty and an air dynasty, or like a sky celestial dynasty, that are like, and they're like the generals or the family members have like some vague supernatural powers, and at least in the stories themselves. Obviously not in real life, they were probably just good at their job. But you could probably do something with that, either fully historical or some low fantasy element, I suppose. I mean, even again, just it not being
Not being the
Aztec,
conquest would be cool.
not being the conquest, and not just about an Aztec centric world would already be steps in the right direction.
Okay. Cool. Last question, as we have left Halloween Town. Turning back specifically to New World, if you had a magic wand and could do one thing in your period specialization ported, make one change in order to make this game less atrociously like colonialism with no consequences, because that's what it is, right? Clearly American landscapes, ultra generic indigenous or old aesthetic with random orbs and random obelisk temples. Clearly we are going for American colonialism with no indigenous people and therefore no human consequences to the colonialism. Also no environmental consequences because everything regrows in approximately 1 minute.
Yeah.
You have a magic wand to change one thing up to and including cancel the game. What do you do?
I mean, cancel the game is the boring answer. So. Well, I have to think about this for a second. I think, like, it would be much less of a problem to me if it is a mystical island. And obviously, I know that European cartographers had a lot of mystical islands.
Oh, they sure did, but this one's real, so therefore it's different.
Right, yeah. But if they could just lean on that a bit more instead of just take out. I would say, if not having American landscapes, American fauna, American stuff there, just have it be a fantasy island. I guess that's one solution, or I guess not solution, but one way that would make it less obviously problematic.
Yeah.
But on the other extreme, I think it could be another way to do it would just be add add a non-European faction, add a Native American faction, have us able to play as them, and use their stuff. Probably not appropriate the spirituality too much.
Yeah, given that the game seems so unconcerned with spirituality, I'd say leave spirituality out of it. Just like have Nahuatl NPCs.
Yeah, that would be a start.
Have Maya NPCs.
Yeah, if you're gonna have American fauna and stuff, obviously, there's no reason not to have American people too.
Exactly.
And,
right.
And that's already a big step, I would say.
As we talked about, right, there isn't necessarily historical grounding for them being able to make it out to the mid-Atlantic using their gunneled canoes. That maybe is a bit too far. But at the same time, King Arthur exists in the game. Let me pull up the document that demonstrates that King Arthur exists in the game.
Well, I mean, if Ming China can get here...
Exactly. But
there's
one right here. King Arthur's arrival. Uniting the land. He's just there. Boy. He's just there. So, given that, there's no real reason to say no. You know, Nahuatl or Native American peoples or Mesoamerican peoples or any combination thereof, definitely, or Amazonian peoples, never made it to Aeternum. Just like let them be another group who exists alongside, and let there be diverse hybrid cultures.
I mean, yeah, obviously the Europeans and stuff didn't bring the turkey and the bison.
I would say hopefully not.
and presumably the island wasn't connected to America in the Pleistocene or whatever, to have those animals get there over land by themselves. So
hopefully
the obvious explanation is that native people got there at some point and brought those animals. I don't know how they would have brought a bison, but that's the only thing I could think of.
A great question. Yeah, because I think they do actually talk about... let me see, there was one thing that was super spooky that I saw. So it's someone's journal. It talked about, how the native animals are different from, the regular animals, and so it's specifically talking about the Fallen Earth, but there was something...
So they acknowledge that these animals have not been seen by Europeans before.
Maybe? It's hard to tell. I need to find where it was. I thought it was Everfall. Corrupted, no. First Light, no. Monarch's Bluffs, no. Cartier's Journal, there you are. Here we go. It's not the animals brought with us on La Renommée that interest me, not the deer or wolf of the isle, though of great size and fierce disposition. It is the beasts native to Aeternum. I fear it would take a lifetime, perhaps several, to see them all, yet my curiosity will not let me remain idle. And then next time, or two later, they are talking about a giant ice wolf, and then in this one, I was on the hunt today that I first caught sight of the stag. Not a stag as familiar to us, but something that seemed grown for the forest and had taken the shape of the stag. I know not how to explain it. Around its horns grew moss, flowers, and its hide was the rich green grass of the forest floor. The sight struck me so I could not move, I could not breathe, until the creature seemed to spot me, then leapt away and vanished into the undergrowth. So right, by native beasts, they seem to be talking about, Fallen Earth things, along with some, spiritual monsters.
Right.
And not, the bison. So, did the bison come here? Were they who brought them? What is happening? Answering that question could give an interesting solution to this problem.
Yeah. As for I do want to briefly go back to seafaring a bit because the
Sure.
when with Ming China getting to this island, and obviously the sheer distance and tribulation that implies to me. There is a sailing culture in pre-Columbian Americas. Well, there are a couple. I mentioned way at the start, I think I mentioned contact with Ecuador.
Yes.
And there is one of the indigenous cultures of Ecuador had a ship called a jangada, or well,
Okay.
the Portuguese called them that, apparently from something that they saw in the Indian Ocean, and they thought it looked similar. But anyway, it is as far as I know, it is the only confirmed pre-Columbian sailing ship.
Okay.
Because there was the Spanish came across one of them and wrote about a sailing ship in their first venture into that area. So it was there before them.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes it even more egregious.
Right.
That there's no idea that someone sailed a little bit east and ran into the ginormous missing continent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty grim. Sheesh. But that's super cool. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that there were sailing ships. I thought there were just the giant canoes, so that's incredibly cool. But yeah, on the Ming specifically, we will have someone on eventually when I do the raid that is all about the Ming Empress that has just been vibing on Aeternum. We'll have someone on who is a specialist in the Qing and can talk way more about, could a ship make it? What would it take for a ship to make it? And is the storyline of this person reasonable? So, have that to look forward to eventually, but I am nowhere close to a high enough level for it, so it'll be a little while.
The dark mystery surrounding the I know. The mystery leads to the town of Sleepy Town.
Yeah, we just left Halloween Town. You could have given me that earlier. Anyway, though, we are going to leave off here in First Light, having covered a lot of ground, and observed a incredibly exceptional lack of a culture this time. Where in previous weeks we talked about the overwhelming amount of Euro-ness, it was cool to be able to talk about it from the other perspective and what that absence does. So, thank you so much for coming on, Pixel.
Of course.
And chat, let's give Pixel some love for this excellent time. And if you enjoyed this, next week we are going a little bit earlier, but on Tuesday we are going to have Javier Rayon, the lead developer of the upcoming game about the Conquest, from the Aztec perspective, a Dream of Darkness. So, kind of continuing this conversation with a developer of historical games. So you have that to very much look forward to. Also, if you like this, make sure you follow the channel. I stream 3 times a week. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't, but we've got some Age of Empires coming up, and our indie game is going to be The Legend of Tianding, starting on Sunday, which is about the Japanese occupation of Taiwan, and a folk hero from relatively early in that period. So, got a whole bunch of stuff to look forward to. Also, if you like this, make sure you tell a friend, because the more we spread the word, the more people we can get on, the more cool stuff we can do. So, I hope you all enjoyed. One more round of applause for Pixel. One more round of boos for New World.
It's my pleasure.
And if you do you have any final quick thoughts, Pixel?
No, I would say we covered quite a bit. There's a lot more to know, and feel free to come to the Southern Meso channel in the OSP server. I'm
or-
there. We can talk about Mesoamerica there for hours.
Or if you type !Discord right now, you can just get access to my server where we all are as well, and we'll also be happy to try and field questions.
That too, yeah.
Yep.
I'd be happy to.
And I think the note I want to leave with here is that Mesoamerican history is in fact long and complicated and cool, and it is just as valid and interesting to put into your games as European history. So, like, I don't know, please start doing that. It'd be pretty cool to see.
It would be.
And with that, I hope everyone has a good rest of your night, and I will catch you all on Friday. See ya, everyone.